The rain hammered against the windshield of the old yellow taxi, blurring the city's neon lights into streaks of color. James Carter, a man in his late 40s with tired eyes and a face that had seen too many struggles, gripped the wheel tightly. He had been driving for hours, hoping for enough fares to buy dinner, but luck hadn't been on his side. His stomach growled, reminding him that all he had eaten was a stale donut from a gas station. He sighed and pulled up to a red light. That's when he saw him, a man standing on the curb, drenched from head to toe, no umbrella, no jacket. James rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" The man looked up, his piercing blue eyes flashing under the streetlights. "I don't have any money," he admitted. James hesitated. Every dollar counted, but something about the man's expression made him nod. "Get in." The passenger slid into the back seat, water dripping from his clothes onto the worn-out leather. His face was partially hidden under the hood of his soaked hoodie. "Where to?" James asked. The man's voice was calm but firm. "Just drive. I'll tell you when to stop." James felt a prickle of unease. Something about the request didn't sit right, but he needed the company even if it was from a stranger. The roads were slick, the city alive with honking horns and flashing signs. He glanced at the rearview mirror. "So, what's your name?" James asked, trying to break the silence. The man hesitated. "Call me Sam." James nodded. "All right, Sam. Rough night?" "You could say that," Sam muttered. James continued driving, taking turns as directed. The man didn't say much, but there was something in his posture, tense, alert, like he was looking over his shoulder. After a while, James cleared his throat. "You running from someone?" Sam didn't answer right away. Then softly he said, "Something like that." James felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had seen desperate people before, people on the run, people with nowhere to go. But Sam didn't look like a criminal. His clothes weren't ragged. His voice wasn't panicked. He was different. The taxi rolled through a quieter part of town, where the streetlights flickered and the sidewalks were empty. Sam suddenly leaned forward. "Pull over here." James obeyed, stopping near a small alley. Sam reached for the door but then paused. "You're a good man, James." James frowned. "How do you know my name?" Sam didn't answer. Instead, he pulled the hood lower over his face, pushed open the door, and disappeared into the darkness. James sat there for a moment, staring into the empty alley. A strange feeling settled in his chest, like something important had just happened, but he didn't know what. With a sigh, he checked the meter, still at 0. He had driven for nearly an hour and earned nothing. "Figures," he muttered, pulling back onto the road. By the time he got home, exhaustion weighed on him. He fell onto his tiny cot in his one-room apartment, the sound of rain still tapping against the window. His last thought before sleep took him was simple. Who was the passenger really? James awoke to the sound of his phone vibrating against the nightstand. His head pounded from exhaustion, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if the events of last night had been real or a strange dream. The mysterious passenger, the rain, the eerie farewell, it all felt surreal. Groaning, he reached for the phone and squinted at the screen. An unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Yeah." A deep voice on the other end spoke in a controlled tone. "James Carter." His body tensed. "Who's asking?" There was a pause. "Then we need to talk about the passenger you picked up last night." James sat up, his grogginess replaced with a sharp jolt of alertness. "Who is this?" The line clicked dead. James stared at his phone. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. He had given plenty of free rides before, mostly to drunk passengers or the occasional lost tourist. But this was different. Someone was watching him. He threw on his jacket and left his apartment, heading straight to the parking lot where he had left his cab. The moment he stepped outside, a black SUV with tinted windows was parked across the street. It wasn't there last night. His heart pounded. He forced himself to act normal, walking to his taxi and unlocking the door. As he slid into the driver's seat, he glanced up. The SUV's engine was running. James exhaled. "Okay, think." If someone was watching him, The best way to find out was to make them move. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. The SUV didn't follow immediately, but James caught glimpses of it in his mirror as he navigated through the morning traffic. "All right, buddy," he muttered to himself. "Let's see how bad you want to play." He took an unexpected left, turned down a narrow alley, hitting the gas. He wasn't about to be tailed all day without answers. As he re-entered the main road, the SUV made the same turn seconds later. James cursed under his breath. This wasn't just coincidence. His hands gripped the wheel tightly as he thought of his next move. He needed to lose them, but more than that, he needed to know why he was being followed. He drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, testing the SUV's persistence. No matter where he went, they stayed close enough to monitor him, but not enough to seem aggressive. Finally, he had enough. He slammed on his brakes, pulling over abruptly. The SUV stopped a few car lengths back. James climbed out of the taxi, heart pounding. He walked toward the SUV with slow, deliberate steps. The driver's side window rolled down, revealing a man in a suit, his expression unreadable. "Can I help you?" James asked, his voice laced with frustration. The man studied him for a moment. "We just want to talk." James folded his arms. "Then start talking." The man gestured toward the passenger seat. "Get in." James let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, no thanks. I don't get in cars with strangers." The man didn't blink. "Like how you gave a ride to a stranger last night." James' breath caught in his throat. "Who was he?" The man's face remained unreadable. "We were hoping you could tell us." James felt his stomach twist. Something about this entire situation reeked of danger. "I don't know anything," he said, choosing his words carefully. The man sighed, as if expecting that answer. "Then I suggest you be careful, Mr. Carter." James clenched his fists. "Are you threatening me?" The man's expression didn't change. "We're warning you. If you see him again, you call us." He slid a small card through the open window. James hesitated before taking it. The only thing printed on it was a phone number, no name, no organization. By the time he looked up, the window was rolling back up, and the SUV pulled away. James stood there, staring at the card, his mind spinning. The passenger from last night wasn't just some lost man in the rain. He was someone important, someone dangerous, and James had just become part of something much bigger than he understood. But the real question remained. Who was the passenger really? James sat in his taxi, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The card with the mysterious number lay on the dashboard, taunting him. His gut told him one thing: he was in deep trouble. The passenger from last night wasn't just some guy looking for a ride. He was someone people were hunting. And now, James was caught in the middle. "Damn it," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. His first instinct was to throw the card away, pretend none of this had happened. But that black SUV, the suited man's warning, this wasn't something he could just ignore. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since yesterday. Deciding that stress wouldn't solve anything on an empty stomach, he pulled out of the parking lot and headed to his usual breakfast spot, a small diner on the outskirts of town. The place was half empty when he walked in. The smell of fresh coffee and fried bacon filled the air. James slid into his usual booth by the window, ordered his regular black coffee and eggs, and tried to act like his life wasn't suddenly a thriller movie. He had barely taken a sip of his coffee when he noticed something that made his pulse spike. A man had just walked into the diner. Not just any man. Sam. James stiffened, his mind racing. Sam wasn't soaked like last night. He had changed into a black leather jacket, his hood down this time, revealing sharp features and those same piercing blue eyes. James forced himself to stay calm, watching as Sam took a seat at the counter, back to the door, like someone who didn't want to be surprised. James debated his next move. Should he confront him, call the number on the card? Before he could decide, Sam turned slightly, just enough to catch James's reflection in the diner's long mirror. Their eyes met for a split second, and then Sam did something unexpected. He smirked. James's breath caught. It wasn't the smirk of a man caught in the act. It was the smirk of someone who had planned everything. Before James could react, Sam stood up, casually placed some money on the counter, and walked toward the exit. Instinct took over. James shot up from his booth and followed. As soon as he stepped outside, his pulse kicked into overdrive. Sam was gone. James whipped his head in both directions. Nothing, no trace of him. The street wasn't crowded, but there were enough people that Sam could have blended in. Damn it, James cursed under his breath. A rustling noise behind him made him spin around. There was a folded napkin on the hood of his taxi. James approached it cautiously, his heart pounding. He picked it up and unfolded it. 3 words were scribbled in neat handwriting. Don't trust him. James stared at the note, his pulse drumming in his ears. His head snapped up. He scanned the area again, searching for any sign of Sam. Nothing. James clutched the napkin tightly. First, the mysterious phone call. Then, the man in the SUV. And now, Sam acting like he was the one in danger. James had no idea who was lying. But one thing was crystal clear. He had just become part of something way bigger than he ever imagined. And he was running out of time to figure it out. James gripped the napkin so tightly it nearly tore between his fingers. His heart hammered as he turned in every direction, scanning the street, the alleyways, the sidewalks. Sam had disappeared like a ghost. James wasn't a paranoid man. He had lived too long in the real world to buy into conspiracy theories or thriller movie nonsense. But this was real. He had picked up a passenger, and now men in suits were watching him, warning him, while that same passenger was leaving cryptic messages, telling him not to trust them. But who the hell was them? James shoved the napkin into his jacket pocket and forced himself to act normal. He had learned long ago that in moments like this, the worst thing you could do was look panicked. The city was full of watchful eyes, and for all he knew, someone was waiting for him to slip up. He walked calmly back to his taxi, slid into the driver's seat, and shut the door. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the key. He needed to think. Then, instinct kicked in. Something felt wrong. His gut had saved him more times than he could count. And right now, every fiber of his being screamed at him that something was off. Slowly, without making any sudden movements, he glanced at his rearview mirror. His blood went cold. A man was sitting in the back seat. James barely suppressed the urge to jump out of his skin. He forced himself to stay calm, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. Drive. The voice was deep, controlled. James swallowed hard. I don't. A metallic click echoed through the taxi. James didn't need to turn around to know what it was. A gun. His breath came out slow, controlled. All right. He started the car and pulled away from the curb. The city lights blurred as he focused on the road, forcing his thoughts to stay sharp. You gonna tell me where we're going? James asked, keeping his voice neutral. The man was silent for a moment. Then, take a right up ahead. James obeyed, keeping his breathing steady. He had been in bad situations before, but nothing like this. Who the hell was Sam? And what had James gotten himself into? The man gave him a series of directions, leading him farther away from the busy streets, deeper into a more secluded part of the city. James' nerves tightened. If they were heading somewhere quiet, it meant one of two things. Either they wanted to talk or they wanted to get rid of him. His instincts screamed at him to act now. As he approached a red light, he made his move. He slammed his foot on the brakes hard. The sudden stop threw the man forward, and in that split second, James twisted in his seat, knocking the gun aside. The weapon went off, the bullet shattering the passenger window. James didn't hesitate. He yanked the gear shift into reverse and stomped on the gas. The taxi screeched backward, narrowly missing an oncoming car. The man cursed, recovering quickly, but James wasn't about to give him a second chance. He swung the wheel hard, fishtailing the taxi into a sharp turn. The tires shrieked against the asphalt as he sped into a side alley, the engine roaring. The man lunged forward, trying to regain control, but James wasn't done. With one swift motion, he jammed the brakes again. The sudden stop sent the man flying forward, slamming into the dashboard with a grunt. James didn't give him time to recover. He threw the car into park, flung open his door, and bolted. His legs pumped as he sprinted down the alley, weaving between dumpsters and fire escapes. He could hear the man recovering, hear the car door open, hear the footsteps pounding after him. James pushed harder, adrenaline burning through his veins. Then he heard something else. Another set of footsteps from ahead of him. His stomach twisted. Trap. Before he could react, two figures stepped out from the shadows at the end of the alley. James skidded to a halt, breathing hard. The first man, the one who had been in his cab, slowed to a stop behind him. The other two, they were in suits, just like the guys from the SUV. James' chest rose and fell as he glanced between them. The streetlights cast eerie shadows across their faces. "Mr. Carter," one of the suited men said, his voice calm. That was quite the escape attempt. James wiped his mouth, buying time. "Yeah, well, I don't like being kidnapped." The suited man chuckled. "No one does." He glanced at the guy who had pulled the gun earlier. "You made a mess." "He's fast," the man muttered, rubbing his shoulder where he had slammed into the dashboard. James clenched his fists. "Look, if you're gonna kill me, at least tell me why." The suited man smiled. "Kill you? No, Mr. Carter. You're far too important now." James stiffened. "Why?" The man took a slow step forward. "Because you're the only one who knows where he is." James' stomach dropped. "Who?" The man's eyes darkened. "You already know, Mr. Carter." James didn't move. His mind raced. They were talking about Sam. They thought James knew where he was. That meant Sam was still on the run. That meant both sides were after him. James swallowed hard. And suddenly, he realized something terrifying. It didn't matter what he said next, because whether or not he had the answers they wanted, these men weren't going to let him walk away. He was in this now, and the only way out was to find Sam first. But the question still remained. Who was the passenger really? James stood frozen in the dimly lit alley, his mind working in overdrive. The men in suits thought he knew where Sam was. That meant Sam was still on the run. That also meant James had something they wanted whether he knew it or not. The suited man took another step forward, his hands clasped behind his back, his presence calm yet suffocating. "We don't want to hurt you, Mr. Carter." James let out a dry laugh. "That why your guy pulled a gun on me?" He nodded toward the man rubbing his shoulder. "Real friendly introduction." The suited man smiled. "I apologize for that. Sometimes my associates act rashly." He glanced at the man in the leather jacket, the one who had been in James' cab. "You made this harder than it had to be." The man scowled but didn't respond. James shifted his weight, trying to calculate his options. He was outnumbered, boxed in. If he made a move now, they'd drop him before he got to steps. He needed a distraction. The suited man must have sensed his hesitation because he raised a hand. "Let's not do anything reckless, Mr. Carter. We just need information." James clenched his jaw. "I don't know where Sam is." The man's smile never faded. "That's not true." James' heartbeat slammed against his ribs. "We saw him leave you a message." The man continued, nodding toward James' pocket. "That little napkin trick, clever, but it proves you've made contact with him, which means, whether you realize it or not, you do know something." James forced himself to stay calm. "Look, I picked up a guy in the rain. That's it. I don't know who he is. I don't know what he did. And I sure as hell don't know where he is now." The suited man sighed, as if disappointed. "I was hoping we could resolve this without complications." He flicked his wrist. The man in the leather jacket lunged forward. James barely had time to react before a fist slammed into his gut. He doubled over, gasping for air. Pain exploded in his ribs. A strong hand grabbed his jacket, yanking him upright. The suited man's face was calm and different. "We don't have time for lies, Mr. Carter." James clenched his teeth, trying to stay upright. His vision blurred from the hit. "I'm telling the truth." The suited man studied him for a long moment, then sighed. He turned to the man holding James up. Put him in the car? James' stomach twisted. No. He knew what happened when guys like this put you in a car. You didn't come back. Adrenaline surged through him. His mind went into overdrive. Think. The man gripping him started to drag him forward. And then James spotted it. A loose brick sticking out from the alley wall. Without hesitation, he twisted violently, wrenching himself free. The second his feet were steady, he lunged toward the wall, grabbed the brick, and swung it as hard as he could. The man behind him barely had time to react before the brick connected with the side of his head. The sickening crack echoed through the alley. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. James didn't wait. He took off running. Shots rang out behind him. Footsteps pounded against the pavement. James ran like his life depended on it because it did. He tore through the alley, vaulting over trash cans, weaving through the maze of side streets. He had no plan, no direction. Just one goal: lose them. Gunfire erupted behind him. James ducked as a bullet whizzed past his head, shattering a streetlight. Shit, he zigzagged, making himself a harder target. The city blurred around him. He spotted a chain-link fence at the end of the alley. No time to slow down. He launched himself at it, gripping the cold metal and scrambling upward. More gunfire. Sparks flew as bullets struck the fence. James didn't stop. He threw himself over, landing hard on the other side. His knees buckled, but he forced himself to his feet and kept running. He darted into the nearest building, an abandoned warehouse. His breath came in ragged gasps as he pressed himself against the wall, forcing his body to stay still. Silence. Had he lost them? Then, a creak. James' blood ran cold. Someone was in here with him. He barely had time to react before a shadow moved near the entrance. A voice, low, urgent. James. James whipped around, fists clenched, ready to fight. But then he saw who it was. His breath caught. Sam. He was standing in the darkness, his blue eyes burning with intensity. You need to come with me, Sam said. Now? James' mind raced. He should have been angry, should have demanded answers. But all he could think was, how the hell did he find me? Sam gestured impatiently. They won't stop hunting you, James. If you want to live, you have to trust me. James hesitated. Then he remembered the suited man's words. You already know where he is. They had been wrong. James hadn't found Sam. Sam had found him. And that raised the biggest question of all. Who was the passenger really? James' pulse pounded in his ears as he stared at Sam, the man who had turned his world upside down in less than 24 hours. The city outside was still alive with sirens, honking horns, and distant shots. But here, inside the darkened warehouse, everything felt suffocatingly still. Sam's eyes locked onto James, burning with urgency. We don't have time, he whispered. They're coming. James' gut twisted. Now? Sam was telling him they were still on his tail. His jaw clenched. Start talking, James demanded, keeping his voice low but firm. Why are they after you? And more importantly, why are they after me now? Sam exhaled sharply, glancing toward the shattered windows of the warehouse. I can't tell you everything. Wrong answer. James stepped forward, jabbing a finger at Sam's chest. I almost got killed tonight because of you. A man put a gun to my head. Another tried to beat the truth out of me. Sam's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides. It's not that simple. Make it simple. James wasn't backing down. Or I walk out that door, and you can deal with them on your own. For a moment, Sam didn't move. Then, finally, he let out a long breath. All right, he said. You want the truth. Here it is. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Those men work for an agency that doesn't officially exist. Government, private, no one really knows. But what they do know is that I used to work for them. James stiffened. Used to? Sam nodded. I was one of their top assets. A fixer. I did things no one else could do. Got my hands dirty so the higher-ups didn't have to. But one day, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. His voice darkened. I found out that everything they told me, the missions, the targets, The reasons behind them was a lie. They weren't protecting people. They were covering up their own crimes. Jean's stomach turned. And let me guess, you tried to expose them. Sam gave a humorless smile. I tried to leave. They didn't like that, so they made me a target. James let out a slow breath, trying to process it all. Okay, but what does this have to do with me? I'm just a taxi driver, a broke one. At that, Sam's expression grew serious. Because last night, when you gave me that ride, you became the only person in the city who had direct contact with me. And now they think I gave you information, something important, something they want. James frowned. But you didn't. I know, Sam said. But they don't believe that, and they won't stop until they're sure. James' hands curled into fists. He wasn't built for this kind of thing. He was a guy who kept his head down, who worked hard just to scrape by. He had spent his life avoiding trouble, not diving headfirst into a damn government conspiracy. But it was too late now. He had already been pulled in. Okay, James said, exhaling. So, what do we do? Sam studied him carefully. We run. James scoffed. Run, and go where? They're everywhere. I have a plan, Sam said, but you have to trust me. James hesitated. Every instinct told him not to. This guy had brought nothing but chaos into his life. But at the same time, if he stayed here, those men would find him, and he doubted they'd be as patient the next time. Fine, James muttered. What's the plan? Sam gave a nod. Follow me. James took one last look around, knowing his life would never be the same again. Then, he followed Sam into the unknown. And as they disappeared into the darkness, one thought still lingered in his mind. Who was the passenger really? I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe, so that you don't miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.